This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNeely program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, I am talking to Donnie Mac. He is with dinosaursarenfake.com, and this is going to be a fun interview today. We're going to learn all about the dinosaur conspiracy theory. Now, I'm pretty new to this theory, and I'm not sure I'm buying it all because, I grew up in a science-based kind of environment. But Donnie, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Rob?
Good. So I wanted to say a shout out. I got some the swag you sent. I got a little dinosaur shirt on. Dinosaurs are fake. So I am definitely interested in what you had to say. I love the logos, by the way. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved with this? Where did you come from?
I've got a background that's mostly in entertainment. And I don't really view the dinosaur site as an entertainment venture. It is. I do view it as scientific and not a conspiracy theory. But I'm from California. I was born and raised in San Francisco. Studied English at Georgetown, and since then I've worked mostly in entertainment, mostly in film. I worked at Netflix for a long time, or for several years at least, and now I do mostly consulting on the creative side. And the dinosaurs, I've been working on the site for a couple of months now, but the topic has interested me for a few years.
So what kind of got you what got you interested in this thing? I mean, I'm new. I thought I knew everything about, and I'm not saying it's a conspiracy or not, but, conspiracy theories, I'm usually pretty well versed. I've studied them all. And so I just heard about this one, and that's pretty interesting because it's like a new thing for me. So educate me a little bit. What is the theory that dinosaurs aren't real?
Okay. The way I got interested was sort of one step at a time. And you know how if you on your phone or on your computer, if you click on certain articles, you start to get topically that feed starts to appear more and more based on the algorithms, based on sort of the sites and browsers and things that you're using. And what happened to me a few years ago, I at one point, I can't remember which one it was, but I clicked on some dinosaur article, and I believe, if it's the one I think it was, and it could have been a different one. I think it was a pteranodon find that they were talking about. And I read the article, and at the time I believed in dinosaurs. I mean, I was a kid. I was bombarded with dinosaur stuff and just didn't think anything of it. I believed in dinosaurs, but I read this article, and it, internally there were conflicts in the article, and I was just sort of scratching my head saying, okay, this is a little fishy, but it's just one article. There could be something funny going on. And the other thing that jumped out at me is I saw the picture of the dig, and, it was a whole bunch of people, all, standing around happy with their pickaxes, standing by a bunch of stuff. And it wasn't a pteranodon, it was just stuff. But they had it in this article with all these pictures of their renditions of what pteranodons look like. And, they sort of just made it into this big thing, like it was this big pteranodon find. And meanwhile, there's a bunch of rocks and people standing around with pickaxes. So I remember at the time thinking, this is fishy, and there's no pteranodon in this picture. And if they found a pteranodon, why wouldn't they show it? Or if they found a bunch of pteranodons? So then what happened to me, so this was a few years ago, and what happened is, since I clicked on that article and maybe a couple others like it, I started to get a lot of these articles into, into my feed on my phone, on my computer, where when they had a find, they would, I would see the article. And so I would click on it. And, I was always looking, after a while, I just felt like there were too many internal contradictions in the articles themselves about what the people said. But I always also noticed the same thing. There would be, whenever there was a picture, it didn't look like, it looked to me like, okay, there's a rock or something, or somebody's holding up a rock that is maybe shaped like a tooth, or something. and I was never convinced by the visual evidence. So that's when I started looking into it deeper. And I started to say, okay, well, what was going on here? And I started to look into Richard Owen and Barnum Brown and, the rest of the industry. And I started to listen to what the paleontologists themselves said and just look really carefully at each find and the practices of the museums. And sadly, because I love dinosaurs. I have nothing against dinosaurs. I think T-Rex would have been really cool if he existed. But sadly, I'm not convinced. I don't think, based on the evidence that is put forth and based on the practices of the museums and the paleontologists and so on and so forth, I just don't think they exist.
So that would upend literally like 180 years of like accepted science to say that dinosaurs don't exist. There's museums all over the planets. There's governments all over the planets that, put money into looking for dinosaurs and fossils and just paleontology in general. Why would they be doing this if dinosaurs weren't a thing?
And that's what happens. So when you come out and take the step to say, hey, dinosaurs are fake or dinosaurs never existed, what immediately you get blasted with, and I've only been on dinosaur Twitter for a month, and I was, so I was new to sort of the public discourse before I sort of went public with it. This was just me thinking about it and reading and evaluating. But what happens is when you say that, you get immediately hit with the tag of conspiracy theorist. Like any of these, anything that you say is out of the ordinary. If you say Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, you get tagged with conspiracy theorist, but whatever. So I noticed that, but the way I envision the dinosaur, what I call the dinosaur hoax or the dinosaur industrial complex, the way I envision that evolving wasn't as a conspiracy theory where a bunch of people sat down and said, hey, we're going to make up dinosaurs and build industries and products and academic fields around it. Nobody said that. Nobody did that. It was a snowball effect conspiracy that really started with one man, Richard Owen, who was competing with Charles Darwin for attention in the scientific community. And obviously, everybody knows Darwin had a ton of it, and Owen had his own fair share, but he wanted more. He was a competitive and very interesting guy. And he was the one who coined the term. And so I would sort of dispute the notion that it's upending 180 years of science. It's upending 180 years of popular thought based on Richard Owen making up the word. And then, suddenly a few years later, after he made up the word and made some drawings and made some, wrote some papers and did some things about what he thought these creatures were, then suddenly people started finding them, and it's sort of like, a self-fulfilling prophecy. If a popular scientist creates an entire category of animals and there's money to be made in fossils and books and all the things, later on, obviously later, the bigger industries, the toys and the movies and all that stuff circulated. That didn't happen immediately. But I don't think it was science. I think it was, popular storytelling started by Owen. And I don't think it was a vast conspiracy. I think it was one that just built sort of one person at a time. And you had, Richard Owen starting it, and then, so-and-so building on it with a find. And suddenly you had characters like Barnum Brown out there, you know, magically finding dozens of fossils, even though he was also involved in, you know, with intelligence agencies and with the oil industry. So I view it as upending storytelling and 180 years of storytelling regarding dinosaurs and Tyrannosaurus Rex and Brontosaurus, which they changed to Diplodocus and Triceratops, and all these creatures that they sort of just got into the popular imagination and then pounded home with propaganda via storytelling, and you know, to the point where most people never question it because they're hit so hard with dinosaurs when they're kids. They don't have the ability to step, and I was the same way. You know, they didn't have the ability to kind of step back and say, wait a minute.
So you say that they never really saw dinosaurs before until they kind of found the first one, and then people, you know, started finding them everywhere. Could that be accounted for because maybe they never looked before, and then all of a sudden they had a reason to go looking for them?
Yeah, it absolutely could. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, I think that's accurately what happened. I would just dispute the notion that what they found was actually dinosaurs. So yes, there was a gold rush, so to speak, or an attention rush or a science rush to find dinosaurs, and that would, you know, incentivize people to get out there and do it, whereas they weren't before. I would just take the next step and say that what they did was manufacture you know, essentially turn rocks or other bones of other animals into what they wanted to find to fit the narrative that was sort of commercially and academically or quote unquote scientifically viable.
So I've been to a lot of natural history museums along the ways. You know, I go to the Natural History Museum here in my hometown in Salt Lake City, and actually they got all sorts of dinosaur bones and fossils around on display. So if dinosaurs are all fake, would you say that everybody at that museum is actually in on the hoax? Are they trying to perpetrate a fraud then? Is that, because it sounds to me, if that's what's happening, you know, that they're all trying to just take people's money. Would you say that, you know, every natural history museum that's out there that has these bones on display are actually, they know that they're fake and they're putting them out anyway?
No, not at all. Not at all. I would not say that at all. I think there are a ton of, I would say there are a lot of good faith actors in the dinosaur industry who believe in dinosaurs and have good intentions. I think I would think, and I have no way of knowing this is just a guess, but I would think that well over half, probably well over 3/4, maybe even over 90% of people in the modern, where we are today, are good faith operators. They believe in dinosaurs. They're holding up a thing that they really think is a tooth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever. I think that there have been bad faith actors along the way that they get it started, and people are trusting. People trusted Richard Owen when he said what he said, and sort of created the category. People trusted Barnum Brown, who was, very, very obviously to me at least. I mean, I guess, anybody can debate what they want, but, this guy was obviously a huckster and obviously a fraud. And he was out there, quote unquote, finding dozens of skeletons of dinosaurs. And so I think that the bad actors are more limited, and there's a lot of good people and well-intentioned people in the industry today that have simply built, and sort of piggybacked on stuff that they didn't necessarily know, like everybody else, they didn't necessarily know was a fraud.
So would you say that all the fossils that you would see at a museum, then they're all just fake? Like completely just not real? Or do you think they're misidentified? Do you think there's some other kind of animal, creature, or category that we were, not aware of yet?
Yeah, I don't think they're, well, obviously in a lot of cases it's disclosed that they're replicas, so that they are made. They're not, it's not like they pieced together a bunch of, cows and mammoths and giraffes and whatever, and that's what we're looking at. It's known that we're looking at replicas. I would just, so my position on the replicas themselves is not really that they're fake. They're replicas. It's a combination. They're misconstructed. They've extrapolated, entire animals from something you just can't extrapolate an animal from. And especially when you're dealing with, remember, in a lot of cases, they're making these replicas from rocks, because they're saying, okay, these things are 60 million years old, so it's not a bone anymore. It's gone through this process. It's fossilized. And so, I think in a lot of cases, if you're trying to extrapolate a whole animal from one sample, which, believe it or not, does happen, they'll find, one thing that they call a bone or a tooth and build an entire animal around it. I think that, if you're doing that, your margin for error is just, your tendency towards error, I should say, is just incredibly high. And you can't do that. You can't take a rock that you say is a fossilized bone and build an entire animal around it with any kind of certainty, especially when you don't know, there's no way to know how old it is. And I know they get into that, 60 million, 65 million years old, blah, 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 but you can't date a rock with any kind of scientific certainty. You just can't do it. So I think, again, it's kind of the same thing. I think that it's not bad faith all the way around on the displays. I think that, it's a combination of building into a system that people believe, that many people believe, and that they've been, programmed and conditioned to believe. When you grow up seeing shows and movies and books and toys of Tyrannosaurus Rex, to the point that you don't question it at all, and then you're tasked with building a model of a T-Rex for a museum, that's based on a bone or a tooth, you don't really feel any qualms about doing it. At least I would imagine. I've never done that myself.
Sure. And I agree with you. If you're replicating dinosaurs based on a little teeny fragment, I think there is probably a lot of possibilities that there's some, margin of error there. So I guess the question I would have, I just kind of understand your world view of things. I know that in certain religious circles, there's a lot of questioning about things like evolution and flat earth and things like that. And I'm not saying you believe those things, but, is some of this, do you believe in evolution? Do you believe in creation? What's your kind of background?
I'm not an expert on either of those. I'm not an expert enough on evolution to say that I believe in it or I don't believe in it. I don't really know what the theory is. I've never studied it in depth enough. I think that, from my view of things, I think that evolution, I think that evolutionary tendencies or evolutionary characteristics are pretty easy to see when you look at different species or you look at, the way things have gone. So I would say, without endorsing, I don't know enough to say that I believe in evolution. I just don't know what that means to say that, but I would say that I do believe that in evolutionary trends or in the fact that species have evolved. So in other words, I'm not endorsing any macro evolution theory because I haven't read enough Darwin to know whether I buy it or not. I don't, I never really cared that much about Darwin. So on evolution, so I would say, I don't know if that makes sense, but I believe in the notion that species evolved without endorsing any sort of big picture or particular theory of evolution, which I don't know what it is. And on the other question, I'm 100% not coming at the dinosaur angle from a theological perspective at all. I am a Christian, but I'm not, when I looked at dinosaurs in the first place, I didn't even realize I'm this far removed from that world, I didn't realize that there had been an existing debate that's sort of a theological one, and that's just not my angle.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that among the group of what they're referred to as young earth creationists, where there's a certain segment of Christianity that believes, the earth is like 6,000 years old. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not saying that the earth is only 6,000 years old.
No, that's not my angle at all. My skepticism towards dinosaurs evolved simply from looking at what they said. So, like I said, looking at the articles, looking at the finds, looking at what they said about dinosaurs, and just not buying it. It had nothing to do with any bigger theological worldview. And I don't know how old the Earth is, and that's not that interesting to me to even to try to figure out if the Earth is 60 million years old or 6,000 years old. I don't know. I don't really care. It doesn't really affect me. But what I do care about is if I see sort of what I view as systemic propaganda being pushed in for whatever the reason. And I think that we have this issue with a lot more things than dinosaurs, where something is just repeated over and over until you can, until there's no questioning, and then they can just sort of get away with saying whatever they want. So that's my take on it. It's not a theological disagreement, and it's not an attack on evolution. I think that, like I said, you can see evolutionary characteristics and trends in species across the board.
Do you think that all fossils are faked or misidentified? So, for instance, I know a little bit about rocks. In sedimentary rocks, like limestone, has all sorts of seashells in it. And would you say that those aren't actually seashells, or those aren't actually fossils? Are you saying that the process of what is called fossilization, is that not a real thing? Or do you think that just some things are fossilized, but some things are not?
I would think that, no, I'm certainly open to the idea of fossils. I don't have anything, I have no reason to believe that there aren't fossils of this, that, and everything that actually existed. So my point is only that what they're saying, that these particular fossils that they're saying came from and belong to dinosaurs, I don't buy that. Like, it's that simple. But in terms of other things being fossilized, sure, why not? I have no reason not to believe that.
So when they say dinosaurs, do you think that at some point some animals that are not dinosaurs, that might just be like big birds, might have been fossilized and then called a dinosaur?
Yeah, I mean, whatever they are, I definitely, I think that there's obviously animals. Well, I should say I believe strongly that there's animals that existed before that maybe don't exist today, or animals that have been fossilized. I'm just specifically saying that I don't see enough proof for for this particular category of animals, as mostly represented by the popular ones. So the T-Rex, the Diplodocus brontosaurus type ones, the Triceratops. I'm definitely open to. I mean, we know reptiles exist because we can see them. So I'm open to different type of reptiles, or different type of turtles, or whatever, or crocodiles, or even things that don't exist today, that existed in the past. I'm open to all of that. It's just I don't see evidence for these creatures in particular.
Okay, I can get that. So, there's a lot of things. There's a class of, extinct animals called Megafauna. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
During the Pleistocene era, which would have been the last ice age, 10,000 plus years ago to 40,000 plus years ago. Would you say that those are different than the things that you're concerned about called dinosaurs? Would you say like megafauna, like for instance, they're uncovering, you know, 5, 6, 7,000-year-old things in the tundra up in Siberia of different types of animals and dogs that don't exist today, and mammoths and things like that. Would you say that those are real, or are those part of the dinosaur hoax as well?
No, 100%. I would say that, you know, and I haven't done a deep dive on mammoths, but I would be inclined to believe, I would be inclined to believe them because of what I've heard, and I haven't inspected this with my own eyes, but what I've heard about the quality of the preservation. Also, it's a very believable animal in the sense that we know elephants exist, and we can extrapolate and say, okay, you know, this would make sense if something like this woolly mammoth, and also we have a nice specimen of it here, and the story lines up. So absolutely, I think that, you know, it comes back to the quality of the evidence, and just you know, the fact that it makes sense, and we're not asked to make a leap from, oh, look, here's a rock or something that we're calling a tooth or a femur or whatever, and boom, there's a big, you know, dragon-like lizard, you know, that walks on two legs and has, you know, sort of all these characteristics imputed by Owen. You know, so absolutely, I'm open to mammoths, to different kind of dogs, you know, all that stuff.
So you're saying that dragons can't exist either, because that's going to really make me disappointed if dragons could be real.
Well, that's what everybody, I mean, you know, I'm not going to go so far as to say that dragons don't exist, because I don't know, but I've never seen proof of them. I haven't seen proof of them. Or same with giants. I can't say that there were no giants, but I can't say that I have proof that they existed either.
So I know you've raised concerns before about like a massive meteor strike. Do you believe meteors exist?
Sure. I think I don't think meteors are out of the question. You know, what the problem that I have is with the growth of the particular meteor theory that now is prevalent in the dinosaur industry, where, you know, if you look back at the literature, it wasn't that long ago that people would say, well, we don't know how the dinosaurs went extinct. It was an unsettled question, and I'd have to go back to put an actual date on it, but it wasn't that long ago. And suddenly something happened, you know, in whatever period of years, these last, you know, I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but where they settled in on this theory that it was definitely a meteor that killed the dinosaurs. And that I don't buy. I'll buy the possibility of a meteor hitting the planet. I 100% do not buy the fact that it's conclusive that a meteor struck the planet and wiped out this whole class of animals that we just, you know, that Richard Owen essentially, whatever you want to call it, invented in 1841, 1842. I don't see how we get there. I've read a lot of stuff about it. I've read a lot of what they put forth. I just don't get there.
Have you done any public debates with anybody in the industry?
You know, I have not. This is my first podcast I've done. This is my first, sort of public speaking on dinosaurs. I started the dinosaur Twitter account a month ago. I started looking into dinosaurs, you know, only a few years ago. So I'd be happy to do it. I've seen, I've watched some of the YouTube stuff of, you know, there was a guy on Joe Rogan, I forget his name, but he was a paleontologist that was debunking a different guy that said dinosaurs don't exist. And, you know, I've just got a little different take on it from sort of the people that I see out there, you know, for the reasons we talked about. I don't have an anti-evolution bias. I'm not making a theological argument. It's more of an empirical argument based on, you know, what is being put forth directly by the industry. So I'd be happy to do it. I haven't done it. I'm partly doing this for fun, and, you know, it's something that it just, you know, we live in this mass media era where, you know, things become truth through repetition. So this is just one little attempt to say, you know, hey, wait a minute, this this story that everyone's been hammering home for the last 180 years. It might not be true. And what else isn't true? It's kind of one of those things. So I haven't debated anyone publicly, but I'd be happy to do it.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you in the first place, is that, oftentimes the people that are espousing what would be considered anti-science perspective on, something that most people considered settled science, right? Even though I hate the term settled science personally, because science is a process. But, when they come from a religious background or a religious bent on these things, it is easy to dismiss them out of hand of having their own, faith-based bias. And so that's why I was interested in talking with you, because I mean, when I first started looking at your Twitter account and stuff, I'm like, okay, I've never heard this before. This is kind of a new thing to me. And so, but you weren't espousing the normal, oh, well, the Earth is 6,000 years old. Okay, well, we can fundamentally right there, that kind of disqualifies people in my mind. Or when they say the Earth is flat, I think to me that makes me a little more skeptical. But you've come off from more of an empirical perspective, and so it's intriguing to me, to be honest. I'm going to look more into this belief, because it's just kind of new to me.
Yeah, no, and it turns me off too. I mean, but I think here's the interesting thing. I think that's what's being used against me more. For example, I've never, the Twitter's pretty young. You can go back and, I mean, you've seen it, but the amount of times that I put forth an argument and say, hey, look, I'll post an article and say, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense what they're saying. And oh, by the way, this picture is baloney. Right? Then what comes back at me is, oh, you're a flat earther, or you're a religious fundamentalist, or whatever. And I'm kind of like, no, or they'll bring up the moon, or they'll bring up, stuff that has nothing to do with what I said. And so it's interesting, because I think in my case, the shoe's on the other foot, in the sense that the arguments that are being used back at me are either just hand waving, like, no, it's, everybody knows dinosaurs exist. We've known it for 180 years, or attacks based on things that have nothing to do with me. And so I think that it's interesting, because I'm not interested in theological debates. I mean, I am in different contexts. I could maybe, have that discussion, but that's not what this is. And I'm interested in what people in the industry are posting and saying that they found, and the evidence for it. And, when I really started looking into it, I was very shocked, as a guy who grew up believing in dinosaurs, having no reason not to believe in dinosaurs, because they, the quote unquote, were telling me that these existed. I was shocked at how flimsy the evidence is. And it's really, it's really that simple for me.
So are you blacklisted from any museums? Yeah.
They always check my pockets on the way out, because, they and I'm joking about that, but I'm not blacklisted from anywhere. I did, I did get, I don't want to say roughed up by, I was out at the archives in London trying to read Richard Owen's papers, and they gave me a pretty good thorough checking on, my bag and everything on the way out the door, make sure I wasn't trying to steal anything, which I wasn't. So I'm not blacklisted. People, most people keep a pretty good spirit about it, and I'm not attacking anybody or whatever. And most people, there are a few people that get really angry right away and start screaming and yelling about flat Earth or the moon or science denier or whatever. But most people are like, they'll listen to what you have to say, and obviously if you say something stupid, they'll say, hey, that's stupid. And I'm comfortable with that kind of back and forth, because I can say the same thing when I see someone holding up an object and claiming it's something that I just don't see how it is. Then I want the right to be able to say, I'm not buying that.
One last question. Is Pluto a moon, or is Pluto a planet?
Look, I mean, since Pluto's a planet, because
yes, okay.
Pluto's a planet, and I don't know if you want to hear my reason for it, but it's really just because when I grew up, Pluto was a planet, and I don't have any reason to change that. I haven't done a deep dive into it, and I sort of like to still hold on to things that that I was told and that I believed as a kid, to as long as I can, unlike dinosaurs.
Well, you and I can hang out then, because as a Gen Xer, I still believe I'm in Team Planet Pluto. So that's kind of my litmus test. It's not it's not a moon, it's a planet. So so Dhani, where can people find out more?
On our Twitter is at DAF 1842, and that's for the year that dinosaurs were invented. And then our site is dinosaursareFake.com, and we have a little bit of writing up there. But we'll be posting some stuff, periodically. Obviously, we post on Twitter here and there, and we're going to be doing some more deep dives in terms of dissecting articles that are put out there by the paleontology industry, and just sort of calling out some of the things that they assert without what we would call basis. And so we'll be out there just trying to get the message home to question these things and question what you're told.
Donnie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've had a really good time, and I think I've got something else to look at now.
All righty, I appreciate it, Rob. I'll talk to you soon.
You have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Rob McNeely program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcneely.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.